I entered the hospital for the visits. I've been there for several months and I've seen a lot of things. Later, they took me to the night shift. When I started that shift, the head of the floor called me, Gloria, to tell me what my obligations were. As usual, to check the patients periodically, to support if there were emergencies, to take some samples, to patrol the recovery rooms. I already knew all that because it was the same thing I did during the day. In fact, I did more during the night shift because sometimes I even gave general consultations. Anyway, I thought the talk was over, but before leaving, Gloria looked at me and said to me, "Please, don't sleep during the guards." I thought it was an obvious recommendation, because it's clear. One goes to work, not to sleep. I let it pass, however. With the passage of the days I realized that the boss did not say it for saying it. It was quite tiring to be a night guard. No matter how much coffee one takes and no matter how many tasks are pending, it is impossible not to feel that the eyelids close for a while. On one of those nights, Gloria found me slumped over a desk, and when I called and did not answer, she realized that I was sleeping. So she woke me up by shaking me, asking me to wake up as soon as possible. My first reaction was to get angry and complain to her, who had only closed her eyes for a moment. However, she had a pale face as if she were scared, and that night she told me everything. She told me, "You are very young, and you were born in a time when people doubt everything. However, it is a fact that there are things that we do not understand. As you well know, sometimes people arrive at emergency in very serious states, for which nothing can be done. But I cannot deny you the cases of negligence that sometimes we hide among the guild as a tacit agreement from colleague to colleague. And in the midst of all that there is anger for those who die due to circumstances of negligence, and they go scared, screaming inside their minds that they do not want to die. What is there after death? Who knows? But you may have noticed the strange things that happen here at night. Doors open, things get lost, voices are heard. Once we even heard the scream of a woman, and that night there was no woman hospitalized. What I want to get to is what happens when a person dies. Whether it was due to pending matters or because they believed it was our fault, something remains. I don't know what it is. I only know that it is something dangerous. It has been happening for a long time in the hospital, and I have heard it in others. It turns out that inexplicable things happen to the night shift nurses. They wake up in other rooms. They give orders they shouldn't. This is not similar to what happens in other hospitals. It doesn't look like the planchada. It's very different. Very dangerous. After telling me that, hesitantly, she told me her story. I'm going to tell you what happened to me. Promise me you won't tell anyone. I haven't confessed it to almost my family. I've been here for 23 years, and in my first year as a new employee, I worked in the morning, then they put me in the night shift, and in the end, I finished at night. To me, no one warned me of anything. Before, there were fewer people, as you can imagine. The nights were calmer because of this. Also, I didn't have as many tasks as you. I had a lot of time left and I began to sleep in the office or in the doctor's dining room. Every night things happened, and as strange as it may seem, one ends up getting used to it. If the pen disappeared, you would come with another one as a spare. But what happened to me was that I fell asleep and had a disturbing dream. I dreamed that I was in my cubicle and I realized that there was a woman next to me. She had her hair all tangled up like grass and her clothes very dirty. Although it was a dream, I was totally lucid and even I knew that I had fallen asleep. In my memories, I was thinking that it was sleep paralysis. As it happens in those cases, I could not move or speak, and that woman slowly approached me. I felt fear. I could not see her face well, and much less because she quickly stood behind me. I do not know how, but she stood behind me and took my arm. I could not move, however, she made me get up with all ease and we left the office. I walked through the hallways, getting closer to the intensive care room, and there we stopped. I felt like we were standing for an eternity. And in a moment, she took me to a specific bed, where there was a young woman who had just been operated on by an appendicitis that led to a peritonitis. When I realized, I don't know how, I noticed that in my hand I held a syringe full of a yellow liquid. Then the woman held me with her hand. She was driving me like a puppet and she was forcing me to pour who knows what into the bag of that woman's serum. And just at that moment, one of the passers-by at that time entered my office and woke me up. I swear I woke up sweating and with a terrible pain in my right arm, the same one that the woman had been grabbing in my dreams. The boy told me that a child with stomach problems had arrived, and I told him that he would leave right away since he needed to get better. I don't know what was the worst thing about that night, the dream of waking up terrified, or what came next. As I was smoothing my jacket, I noticed that there was something in the pocket. I thought it was a pen. However, what I found was a syringe full of something yellow, identical to the one I had just dreamed of, so I ran to see the girl who had been operated on, the one I saw in my dreams, while I checked the vital signs machines. I noticed that she was fine. In fact, that woman recovered very quickly, and we discharged her 6 days after that night. I never slept in the guard again. I advise you to avoid this kind of thing. It will be better if you don't do it. As the nights went by, that conversation left me very tense and terrified. Only Gloria knows if she told me to scare me with the intention of forcing me to be awake. However, months later, I have always seen strange things, and although I have gotten used to several, I still think about her story. Being about to finish my nursing career, I had to look for a job or a place where I could do my pre-professional practices. It should be in a hospital or in a clinic, by recommendation of my professor. It was easy for me to get into the hospital. He told me not to work at night. He recommended that for fear of being scared. Also, I knew I was very scared if they told me about ghosts. In the morning shift, I wasn't doing well. The bad thing was that it was very tiring. I had to go from one place to another, and for this I didn't even have time to study. A few months passed, and my hospital boss told me they needed staff to do the night shift. That news fell to me like a gift from heaven. I was already anxious to be on that shift, but whenever I was going to ask, they told me that the staff was complete. The job they assigned me was to take care of the patients, such as giving them all their medicines or going to them if they needed any help. Since it was not so hard, I had enough time to continue studying. However, some nights when I passed through the neonatology room, where babies are kept who were born prematurely, I heard the babies crying. I thought it was because the incubators were failing and this was what bothered them. When the babies cried, the person in charge of that room always told me to accompany her to see what was going on. She didn't want to go alone. She never told me why, until I found out the worst way. A while passed, and this nurse who was in charge of that room was sent to another hospital. Before leaving, she told me not to go alone to see the babies, that I should always go in with someone. That was for my own good. I asked her, "How is that for my own good? Explain to me." But she said to me, "The less you know, the better for you. I don't want to ruin your job." Days passed, and they assigned me the position of being in charge of the neonatology room. My function was easy. Every time I heard the alarms of the incubators ringing, I had to call maintenance to take care of it, like, for example, issues with oxygen and heat. But when the maintenance workers went to see the problem, they told me that the oxygen keys were closed. Also, they called my attention, saying that I couldn't let anyone pass to that place because it was restricted. Another night passed, and the incubator alarm rang again. However, I did not call maintenance. I went to the place myself to see if someone had lowered the oxygen key. When I got there, I saw that the key was actually lowered. Angry, I went everywhere looking for the person who did such a criminal act, but I did not find anyone. That's how the days went by, and the same thing was repeated every night. Someone lowered the key to the oxygen. It got to the point where I got tired, and I went to the boss and told him everything that was happening. He reprimanded me. He told me how it was possible that I was so irresponsible in letting someone pass into a restricted place. I had no choice but to tell my boss that he should stay for the night shift, and when what I told him happened, that he should come immediately. That same night, I decided to stay near the room, and as soon as the babies started crying, I would enter the place to catch the criminal who was lowering the key. It was almost 3 in the morning when the babies began to cry. I immediately went to the place, and what I saw, I could not believe it. I saw a lady with a black dress, wanting to grab one of the babies. Immediately I called her attention, and I said in a loud voice, "Ma'am, you do not have permission to be in this room. This room is restricted. Ma'am, can't you hear me? Answer me." When the lady turned towards me, I saw that she had no face. I could also notice that she had no feet, she was floating. The fright I had at that moment was so great that I immediately let out a scream, so much so that my boss, security, the doctors, the nurses, and all the others came right away. When they arrived, they asked me what was happening to me, since they saw me crying, upset, trembling, and I could not pronounce the words well. Shaking, I told my boss what I saw. That same day, he sent for a priest to bless the place. When this man arrived, I noticed that the atmosphere was very heavy. He said it would take him several days to clean the whole environment completely. In the meantime, he asked us to move that room to another place immediately. That room was changed, and by doing that, the babies no longer cried at night. Now I understand why my other nurse friend who was initially in charge of the room did not want to enter that place alone and also told me not to do it either. I suppose she must have seen the same woman I saw. I worked as a forensic nurse in the closure unit of a hospital. On one occasion, we had an older lady who swore that she was being persecuted and abused by a demon, whom she called Tiberio. So many strange things happened while she was in the unit. For example, when we entered her room, we took normal care of her. Then we talked to her and laughed, but seconds later, she started screaming, cursing someone. Sometimes, we ran to her room and found her looking like she had been in a fight. She had bloodshot lips, purple eyes, and marks all over her body. No one ever saw her doing these things to herself. Also, things were moving around the room. On one occasion, she was in protection restrictions, which is when the person is held with a straitjacket, since the doctor thought he was hurting himself. So there was no way she could do something while she was held. But whenever we went to see her, we saw that she had new marks of blows or cuts. The room was secure, so there was no way for anyone else to do this. When we asked her, she simply said, "By Tiberio." After they discharged her, we always had problems with that room she was in. We have a room in our unit that we are convinced is haunted. It's a room in which, curiously, more patients die than in any other room in the unit. This had been happening long before I started working there. One of the doctors was so frustrated with the number of deaths in that room that he nailed an angel holding a rosary outside the door. That was years ago. And this doctor died recently due to a disease. He treated many patients in that room. And I've had some disgusting experiences in that place. There's a normal bathroom next to this room, which has a bathtub. This is an intensive care area, so obviously we never use it. And it acts like a storage closet more than anything else. There have been several cases in which I closed the bathroom door and left the patient's room, only to discover that the door was open again. Once, I sat right outside the patient's room to know for sure that no one else was entering. I was next to the door of the room, and I could hear strong knocks coming from the bathroom. I went there, opened the door, and saw that nothing had fallen inside, nor was there anyone there. In addition to all that, There was a pediatric patient in that room who wouldn't stop talking about a doctor who always came in at night to tell her she was going to get better. No one knew who she was talking about. Finally, when she recovered enough to be able to walk around the unit, she pointed to the photo of the doctor who visited her at night, and it was precisely the doctor who had died years ago. She told me that was the doctor who had told her she was going to recover, and so it happened.